such as your current Active Allegheny grant or other efforts that involve the intersection of transit and land use.
Great, thank you. Next we'll do James.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Jost. I'm on the consulting team. I'm a landscape architect with GAI Consultants. We're based out of Pittsburgh as well, and we're excited to get to present to you all today. Thank you.
And next, Rich from GAI.
Everybody, Rich Krajovic with GAI. I'm consultant project manager and a transportation engineer, and I've worked on a number of these station projects with the Authority over the last few years. It's been a great experience.
Thanks. I'm just going to go down the list. I have Todd Wilson next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Todd Wilson. I'm also with Rich and James at GAI, and I'm a traffic engineer and traffic planner.
Great, thanks. Elijah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elijah Hughes. I work with Evolve Environment Architecture. We're on the GAI team working for Port Authority on this project. We're based out in East Liberty on the East Busway.
Thanks, Elijah. And Karen.
Hi, all. This is Karen Breen of Breen Associates. I'm on the GAI team as a community planner, and I'm working on public and stakeholder engagement. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That, I believe, is our team. Those are the only names that I see. So I am going to just do, so the way this is going to work, basically, just like a few kind of ground rules. We're going to do a presentation on just a brief overview of our program and then the project itself. And then we're going to have a kind of a moderated Q&A session afterwards. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, if you could please type it into the chat box, and we will answer the questions during the Q&A period. So we'll just kind of moderate it that way. And then there'll also be an opportunity for you to ask a question in person. I'll go over the raise hand function after the presentation. So also, if we could try to keep yourself on mute if you're not talking, that would be great, just to kind of mitigate like background noise. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to do a really quick overview of our Transit-Oriented Communities program. James, if you could go to the next slide. So the TOC program plays several roles in encouraging transit-oriented development in Allegheny County. So transit-oriented development is dense, it's mixed use with, a variety of uses in one development, residential, commercial, and beyond. It's walkable, and of course, it's close to high quality transit. Next slide. Our TOC program consists of several areas, including the TOD guidelines. These were created to provide stakeholders like you all with best practices for transit-oriented development. And they're meant to serve as a reference and a guide for planning decisions throughout the region. We've also worked on some TOD zoning best practices for municipalities like Carnegie to kind of make suggestions for how to redo the zoning code to better encourage TOD. We have a first and last mile program that provides support and advocacy for projects that help connect people to transit via other modes like biking and walking. We have a station improvement program, which is planning for upgrades to our current stations to promote ridership and transit access. We also do some joint development. Next slide. So the Port Authority can play several roles in joint development. We can act as a sponsor for joint development on our property, which is kind of what this project is all about. We can act as a stakeholder for any development that occurs within the zone of influence or the half-mile radius around our current or future stations. And then we can also act as an advocate for sustainable land use decisions along all of the Pittsburgh region's transit corridors. Next slide. So that's just like the briefest of brief overviews. If you want to learn more about any of those projects and more, please visit our website, which is it's on the Port Authority's site under projects and programs and transit-oriented communities. There's a lot of really great resources there that I really encourage you to check out. Next slide. We also have a site just for this project, and you can see the website there. This is where you can find updates. You can view slideshows and a video of past meetings. You can also submit comments. So the site will be regularly updated as there are updates to the project. Really quickly, some context for this project before we dive in. Port Authority has secured some congestion mitigation and air quality improvement program funding, or CMAQ funding, to help pay for planning and construction of a new parking garage at the Park and Ride site in Carnegie. The existing parking lot, as I'm sure you all know, during normal times is in very high demand. The 2010 West Busway TOD assessment plan called for a new parking garage at this site, as well as made recommendations for some transit-oriented development on the site as well. So some suggestions were first level retail space, perhaps upper floor space for offices, maybe educational uses, as well as some residential. So this planning process is basically presents an opportunity for us to partner with a developer to do some TOD on a portion of our site and build a park and ride garage to accommodate an additional 200 spaces on another portion of the site. Building the garage and doing this process gives us a chance to reconfigure the site and better connect both the park and ride and Carnegie Station to downtown Carnegie. So we're currently evaluating 2 different scenarios for the site, and we are hoping to get your input on these 2 designs tonight. So I'm gonna hand it over to Rich on the consultant team to start the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Maura. James, if we could switch ahead to the next slide. I'd like to go over just a quick outline. We are going to touch upon the 5 main bullet points here. I will cover the first handful or so to talk about a follow-up on some of the summary items that following on what Maura had covered. And I'll get into some of the garage planning analysis, but Elijah and James will pretty much take the lead with that section before getting into the 2 scenarios. And then we'll wrap it up at the end and end the presentation with our question and answer session. So first slide, project summary. The project goals, and I know Maura, you had stated a few of them. The CMAQ process for us, you had mentioned adding over 200 spaces. So we're looking to add overall 400 spaces within the station area. As a community partner, the Port Authority is studying how to maximize pedestrian and bicycle enhancements as part of the project as well. Also, currently, there are no bus transfers at the facility. Ride Acta, for instance, customers, they use the on-street shelter on West Main Street. And though this project may not guarantee in-station transfers, our intent is to design the station to allow for the ability for operators to have on-site connections, whether it's ACTA, future Port Authority routes, access, regional buses, etc. The garage design itself, it will consolidate all of the long-term parking into a single structure. This will keep space available for future transit-oriented development within the site, should developers show interest in that at a future date. The 2 garage concepts that Maura had noted to be shown later in the presentation will include both a phase 1 and a phase 2 for each, in which you'll see phase 1 is primarily just construction of the garage itself. And then the phase 2 will be the ultimate development goal with the transit-oriented development and other longer-term access improvements. Should development be delayed and not occur for a number of years, as an interim, these TOD sites could be temporary surface lot expansions or green space, for example. Next slide, please. Just a brief timeline of what we've done to date, where we're headed. Back in 2015 through 2019, as mentioned, was the submission of the CMAQ and award of the grant. Followed by December of last year, we had a project kickoff with the authority. And soon after, in spring of this year, we began our site research. And of course, the whole COVID pandemic threw us for a big loop there. but luckily, you know, we were able to have this meeting with you folks and get your input. We're excited for that. Most of this summer, we've been drafting our concepts for the garage designs. We had initially looked at 3. One was found to be, just didn't work very well operationally for the Port Authority. That was a large parking deck over the entire site. So that narrowed it down to the 2 options that we'll be sharing this evening. As you'll note there in bullet number 5, we are presenting our refined concepts to you folks. And where we're headed from here, we're looking to take one single concept into final design. And the intent is to start that work next year. So we'll talk a bit about the garage planning analysis. I'll start that off with the safety assessment that Todd and I had performed earlier this summer. James, you want to go to the next slide, please? Similar to the process that the Federal Highway Administration has, their road safety audit program, the team performed assessments of the park and ride area and roads immediately surrounding Carnegie Station. Given the primary intent for this project was to evaluate the locations for the garage, we did focus the majority of our studies on site at the Carnegie Station. However, we did look at roads and sidewalks and areas connecting to the station as well. Safety recommendations shown here in the bullet list to the right include installing ADA compliant curb ramps, performing sidewalk maintenance, improving bicycle accommodations and connections, and replacing and updating signage. There's also some opportunities for some signalized intersection improvements, specifically along West Main Street that we had noted as well. And the following couple of slides will give you a few examples. So here are a few photos taken throughout the station and adjacent to it. And these are the sorts of recommendations just to give you a visual. Providing sidewalks along streets, we have noted pedestrians walking along Veterans Way for interest. For example, there are no sidewalks along that roadway. However, it is a main entrance into the station area, as well as within the station from the far corner of the parking lot to the station platforms. You basically walk a few hundred feet within the aisles themselves. Lack of ADA compliant curb ramps and other features was something that we found within and surrounding the station. So that'd be something we'd look to upgrade, as well as general sidewalk maintenance. You can see the image on the lower left with the ponding of water. Obviously that can freeze in the wintertime. Next slide, give you a few more examples. Improving access and connections to the site in general, both for bicycles and pedestrians. We have noted several individuals riding their bikes within the street. You could see in some of these photos, there's clearly a intended pedestrian access route with the worn paths in the grassy areas. We noted some confusing signage in some locations, and others we noted there wasn't enough signage. We try to avoid what we call sign pollution, but we want to make sure we put everything assigned appropriately and the messages are clear. So these are just a few examples, as I had mentioned. The good thing is those within the Port Authority's property itself will be corrected with the station redesign. So we're pretty excited about that. However, we do note that there are others outside of the Port Authority's direct control, which may be undertaken as future projects by other state agencies, would be an example, or private developers or even utility companies. So with that, if we go to the next slide, and I'll hand it over to Elijah.
Thanks, Rich. So this is an opportunity that doesn't come that often. This is an opportunity to reconstruct a major station area along one of Port Authority's most important fixed guideways. And so with that being said, we're doing a very thorough kind of background analysis to make sure that we understand not only the site itself that we could be making changes to, but also the surrounding context so that we can ensure that we're making the right connections and that we're placing things on Port Authority's property with the right relationship to the surrounding area. So we do a lot of kind of basic background research that you all know pretty well as residents of the borough, but we'll just step through that pretty quickly here. So what you're seeing on the screen is kind of a small 3D view of everything within half a mile of Carnegie Station area right at the middle. We can see Chartiers Creek flowing through the borough, and you can see that there are low-lying kind of flat areas on either side of the creek. This is where you have West Main Street west of Chartiers Creek and East Main Street east of Chartiers Creek, and these are all areas that are easily walkable because they are within that flat, low-lying area, and it's also where the majority of Carnegie Borough's kind of market-based activity is taking place. It's where all the small businesses are, the institutions, the services that that make the borough work. So next slide. We also look at zoning. This is what tells us what's possible to build on our site and how we relate to some of the surrounding context. On Port Authority's property, that's within Carnegie Borough's D3 arterial district. And so that means that on the front and sides, we don't need any setback at all. But in the rear, we do need at least a 10-foot setback. And the height restriction is 5 stories for a typical building, which would be about 60 feet. However, we're building a garage here, which James will go into in greater detail. And so ultimately, we'll maximum have a 4-level garage so that we remain within that 60-foot height maximum envelope. To the rear of the site, on the other side of Logan Street, is the M1 planned industrial district. And this is intended for kind of a mix of industrial and commercial uses. And so that's what's in the kind of immediate area around this site. Next slide. So there's zoning, which is what is allowable on a particular property. And then there's land use, and this is also recorded by the Allegheny County Real Estate Office. And we've sorted it down into a couple of simple categories here, but this is the type of activity that actually is taking place within those properties. And so the orange there, the dark orange is retail and office-based commercial uses. The lighter orange are industrial and warehouse type commercial uses. The kind of red magenta color would be institutional uses. These are like your library, your churches, your municipal offices, and then all of the blue is residential, with the darker being higher density residential multi-unit buildings. So you can see, everything within that low-lying area on either side of Chartiers Creek and along East Main Street in particular, that's where a lot of the most active uses are within Carnegie Borough. And these are the types of uses that we'd like for Port Authority's Carnegie Station and garage to be well connected to, so that people can easily include, shopping and working at Carnegie businesses into their typical commute patterns and trips on Port Authority's West Busway. Next slide. With regard to walkability in particular, we do, this is called a walk shed analysis. It's like a watershed, but instead of a single drop, every drop of water going to a single point, it's every walkway going to a single point, that single point being Carnegie Station. So everything within that blue blob on the map is within approximately a 10-minute walk of Carnegie Station. And you can see that there are places that are close to Carnegie Station that are not necessarily within that 10-minute walk. And that's because there are barriers that kind of change the shape of what is walkable. And so those are places where there's a lack of crosswalks, a lack of sidewalks. And in particular, we have Chartiers Creek, and there are only so many ways that you can cross the creek. So we're looking for how can we improve the places where people can walk so that when people are getting to the station, it's an easier walk, it's a safer walk, and it's a more attractive way of getting to public transit. Next slide. So if we make some, simple assumptions about the types of things that we can do on this site, things like adding a potential crosswalk at 3rd Avenue, if that were possible, creating better walkways on Port Authority's property itself, going from one end of the property to the other and across, and adding sidewalks at different points. If we make a couple of those assumptions, everything within the pink area will have a better quality walk to the station area. There aren't necessarily any projects that will expand the area that's within a 10-minute walk, but we can make that 10-minute walk a better, safer, more attractive experience. Next slide, and I'll hand it off to James.
Thank you, Elijah. So as you saw on the previous slides, we kind of looked at the area, zoomed out to the half-mile walking radius. And now we're going to kind of zoom into the site to kind of look at some of the features that are directly affecting the park and ride area. So here we're looking at our main pedestrian and vehicular gateways entering the site. We have called out at the top the primary vehicular entry points. Those come from 2 entry points upon Logan Street and the main primary access point along Veterans directly in front of the Borough Building as it sits today. Some issues to the south that we also are pointing out are the access points for pedestrians to enter the Carnegie Station and the park and ride. So some things that we were able to notice is our main point of access here is at Jefferson Street and Mansfield Boulevard or West Main Street, that intersection. Here we have some issues with some jaywalking and desired crosswalks that we see highlighted of people trying to cross before this intersection. And we also have the issue of crossing over a 4-lane road of both Jefferson and then Mansfield Boulevard, causing some just pedestrian safety issues that we wanted to call out. It could be challenging getting to the site from the main downtown Carnegie area. So just highlighting that this is your main access for pedestrians to enter. They're having to cross multiple lanes of traffic and having issues of potentially some crosswalks with faded or dated crossing paintings and paint markings to get across the way. And then zooming out to kind of realize the distance between actual vehicular access into the site from the Main Street area. So to the left of the screen, we have the intersection of Cubbage and West Main. This is the point where vehicles would enter from this side of the site, gaining access to the primary entry point of Veterans Way. The next intersection that we have would be at Jefferson Street, which is just over 1,900 lineal feet. So that shows that we have a very long expanse between those 2 intersections. Noting this opens up the opportunity of a 3rd Street intersection enhancement that could provide for additional pedestrian access or even potentially future vehicular access into the site, crossing the existing abandoned rail line that would allow you to have earlier access into the site. So we have that highlighted in red there. And then to the other end of the page, we have the intersection at Campbell's Run Road or Chartiers Avenue, noting how that would be an additional 460 lineal feet from that Jefferson Street intersection in that distance. Zooming into the site a little bit more, so some things that we were able to analyze as we got onto the site, looking at different opportunities and challenges that are present today. So the parking ride is a surface lot that's roughly 3 acres when you include the bus turnaround loop as well. This allows for some good flexibility for future placement and construction of the parking structure, which you'll see soon in the presentation. And then it's also just a very flat lot. So it's something that we don't often get in Pittsburgh, but it's a good opportunity that we have at this site in particular. What Carnegie Station does have also going for it is has significant daily ridership. According to the calendar year of 2017, weekly average stops of top almost at 1,000 daily users. So that's something to also pay attention to that we have here. We also have good access to local infrastructure at Carnegie, so that provides us an opportunity for constructability of the parking garage, as well as potential future TOD. And then we also want to look at how we can look at the site, not only considering the garage, but we also can see how we can enhance the site overall, including the operation of the facilities of the bus turnaround at this location too. Some challenges that we do have are the overhead power line that bisects the existing park and ride site. This power line crosses over just right at 3rd Street, so that could provide additional cost for infrastructure changes in the future if the vertical garage goes in that location. And then vehicle access, we can consider that sort of limited as we are having the main points of access from Veterans and Logan Street there. Turning our viewpoint back towards the Borough Building, some things that we can take into view here is our proximity to the Borough Building and its associated on-site employment demand that we have. That's an opportunity for us here. The site does have a great frontage along West Main Street, which has high average daily traffic of over 10,000. That's something that would be very important for any potential commercial tenants to come in and develop on this site. We do have the non-active rail line located directly adjacent to our site. This is considered an opportunity and a challenge as it is today, but this is something that we also realize would be very beneficial for the Port Authority and the Borough of Carnegie if this is converted to a rail trail in the later dates. And then we also have the potential vehicular and pedestrian access at 3rd Street. We just want to highlight that again as a very earlier, quicker way to gain access to the site, which would be a great opportunity for the users of the site as well. Some challenges, again, kind of highlighting that rail line as it is today. It is currently owned by Genesee & Wyoming, Inc. So just acquiring those right-of-ways is a current challenge, but it is something that should be worked on, and the Port Authority supports that. And then the continuous retail frontage that we have along West Main Street currently doesn't exist because of the park and ride, but that would be an opportunity to challenge at a later date. And then again, looking at the intersection here at West Main and Jefferson. So the connection between the busway and the proximity to the Carnegie downtown is an opportunity to get people to access here. So some site improvements that we highlighted a little bit ago can easily increase that and make that an even better opportunity. We do have great destinations in close proximity to the station, such as Carnegie's Downtown Business District, the Andrew Carnegie Free Library, and Off-Wall Productions, is just to name a few. Some streetscapes that we also wanted to note as opportunities that can happen here. So maybe reducing the amount of time that pedestrians would be in the roadway. So maybe we could look at some road diets that we noted during PennDOT construction improvement projects that were happening along West Main and Mansfield, that the road was operating well at the 2 lanes here. So noting that this could potentially shrink the road down, we would like to consider that as an opportunity for the future improvements as well. Bringing us into the challenges, the park and ride site is adjacent to the busy road. So noting how West Main currently sits with its 4 lanes and then the additional lane of parking on the borough's side there. As a challenge, crossing those 4 lanes for pedestrians, and it also conflicts people from being able to have easy access to downtown at that current alignment. So that's just creating a challenge from bringing people to and from the site. So that kind of wraps up our general analysis of where we have been today. So now we want to jump into the next part of the presentation, which is showing you the 2 scenarios that we looked at for this. And with scenario 1, I'll toss it back to Elijah.
Thanks, James. So we're looking at 2 different ways where we can add a garage to this site. And the site has some constraints to it. It's somewhat narrow and long, but we also have to maintain the ability for Port Authority to lay over buses here. This is a multifunctional site. It's not only a park and ride with a station area, it's also a major operation center with bus layover facilities and driver facilities as well. So next slide. Scenario 1 looks at putting a garage over top of that layover and driver facilities area, that kind of operational nerve center at the end of the West Busway. And what this does is it creates space off to the left near your municipal building, near the borough building, for potential development. That blue box could potentially be a development site where something located close to transit might add something to the West Main Street commercial district. Scenario 2, which James will go into, looks at placing the garage off to the left so that it's not over top of that layover area. So when you put the garage over top of the layover area, it stretches everything out to be kind of long and skinny, such that it is in line with the column grid of that garage structure. And so that's why it's laid out in the way that you see here. Buses would come in from the east into underneath this garage. They would wrap up toward Logan Street. They would come along Logan Street. There would be on either side, there would be places for buses to lay over, waiting for their next trip. Along Logan Street, there would be, in this scenario, bus charging stations for potential electric buses. The charging stations might not go in when this project is constructed, but we do want to leave open the possibility for potential electric bus supporting infrastructure. Then the buses would wrap around near that blue box. It would wrap down toward the West Main Street edge of the site, and they would return back to the West Busway toward the Carnegie Station area. With, again, more spaces for buses to lay over on either side. This scenario also creates space potentially for other operators, perhaps from other agencies, to coordinate their schedules with Port Authority and make transfers in this area. There's no planning for that yet, but we do want to leave that possibility open with any of these designs. Drivers accessing this park and ride facility would enter primarily from Logan Street. However, a connection to Veterans Way remains possible as well. And they would enter into this area, and they would enter into the middle of the garage where there would be gates, and then there would be a ramp up to the garage above. Next slide. We're also planning for and leaving open the possibility a connection to West Main Street. So this site could potentially be reconfigured at a later date to easily provide direct access for both buses and park and ride vehicles to West Main Street. For drivers accessing the park and ride, it means that they're not having to drive into the neighborhood, into Logan Street or Veterans Way to access the park and ride facility. It gives the facility a real front door on West Main Street. And with that intersection improvement would of course come improved crosswalks and signalization infrastructure as well. For buses, this would allow for Port Authority to have easier connections further to the west or to their garage as well by providing buses on the West Busway direct access to West Main Street and 3rd Street as well. Next slide. So for the layover facility itself, we have space for 8 to 10 Port Authority buses, or as well as 1 to 3 regional buses. So we're, by having this much space, we have some flexibility in terms of how we can use that. The layover spaces are larger than the layover spaces that Carnegie Station layover facility currently has. Right now, those are sized for 40, 45-foot buses, which are the single-length buses. We're creating space here for 60-foot buses, which are the articulated double-length buses. And that will give Port Authority some flexibility here in terms of what they're able to use on the West Busway and routes in the surrounding area. There's also space for van services such as ACTA or Access to park their vehicles here, as well as space for Port Authority service vehicles. In both scenarios, we of course have space for bicycle parking. This is both to serve the current need for bicycle parking and to serve a potential rail-to-trail conversion of the rail line that is not currently in use. That rail line connects all the way to the Panhandle Trail, which connects to the whole Montour Trail network. And so by placing some bicycle parking here, or at least creating space for it, we're preparing the site for being that trailhead potentially in the future. Next slide. So off to the left, we have that blue box that's potentially a site for development in this scenario. Per zoning, it could be up to 5 floors, up to 60 feet tall, which would be about an 80,000 square foot building. There would be the potential for kind of front door facade frontages along both West Main Street and facing into the Port Authority property. And there's the potential to configure that site in a couple of different ways, either continuing to preserve access from Veterans Way or using that for loading dock access. There's also the potential for a little bit of infill retail, something like a coffee shop or a convenience store underneath, tucked into the garage a little bit, facing West Main Street. It would be a little bit challenging, but we are leaving space for that if the market supports it. There would be a pickup and drop-off area along Logan Street. So if you are dropping your spouse off, perhaps at Carnegie Station, or picking them up when they come home from work, there would be space to do that on Logan Street. And then there would be second, third, and fourth floor parking in this garage for a total height of 4 stories. And it is, in this scenario, 465 spaces, which is more than is needed to meet the requirements of the CMAQ funding that Port Authority is receiving. Next slide. So this is a summary slide. We have one at the end that compares the 2 scenarios side by side, and essentially it repeats what I just went through with you. One thing to note that's important between the 2 scenarios is this active frontage percentage down at the bottom. So in this scenario, we have a very long garage facing West Main Street, and the development site is off to the side. And so the ratio between those two is that 19% of that entire frontage facing West Main Street is active, is developable. And so, you know, we do want to make sure that anything that goes into this site is contributing to the West Main Street environment. And so the next scenario, which James will go into, I think provides a more attractive, more usable, more functional alternative to this scenario. James?
Thanks, Elijah. So yeah, I'll go into scenario 2. So scenario 2, as Elijah pointed out early on, was that we have placed the garage in this location adjacent to the Borough building off to the far side of the site. This allows for an open air yet expanded bus operations turnaround loop towards the back of the site, which can then be enhanced and concealed behind potential future TOD development that could happen along West Main Street, allowing for the addition of some new public spaces, such as the plazas, that could allow for those who are using the rail to trail conversion, hopefully in the future, as well as those using the parking garage and maybe having enjoying a restaurant at the ground floor of this potential TOD. So we're just designing the space to be all inclusive for all the users that could potentially be here, and creating a space that could be a destination within Carnegie. So as you can tell here, again, like we highlighted, the garage is adjacent to the Borough building, tucking the overall loop access towards the back. We do have the drop-off location and ADA parking for the site that would have access off of Logan Street. And then doing some site enhancements as well to the station area platforms that would allow for better connection as you're crossing at Jefferson Street to come into the site overall. Highlighting some of these features, as we noted, the ADA parking and drop-off, again, is located with access and single entry access and exit from Logan Street, and allowing for the 9 needed ADA spaces to be located within that, bringing you to a very close proximity to the outbound and inbound platform stations. We are hitting about 10 to 15 bus layover spaces, similar to scenario 1, where we're able to accommodate the 60-foot articulated buses within this. In this, we have designed a new loop scenario where we're able to house some of the potential future electric charging stations and then a driver comfort facility station within this internal loop, keeping all operations for the bus drivers centralized into this design and easy access for them and separate from the rest of the site. We do have strong vegetated buffers around all of these areas, which come into play for the option of phase 2 of this one. But we just also want to emphasize that we are thinking about potential green infrastructure uses that could happen within these vegetative areas. Inside the garage itself, we are highlighting that we have access points from veterans, an entry point from Veterans Way, and then an entry and exit point from Logan Street. This also has a rear speed ramp at the back. So this is the only area of the garage that has slope to it. The platforms of the garage itself are flat, and that way they could also be considered convertible garage in the future as well if we wanted to take that route. We do connect this area, the garage itself, to the TOD potentially in the future with the use of the pedestrian bridge, so that perhaps if there is office or residential on the upper floors, they have quick, easy, and weatherproof access from the garage itself to the TOD there. We do have the loading and back of house facilities for the TOD have access through the garage itself, but they would be tucked behind the building and in between that and the bus turnaround loop area. And then, as mentioned before as well, the hopeful future to rail to trail conversion that would enhance the station as well as Carnegie as well. And then looking at the phase 2 options, so how we connect the bus loop to 3rd Street and provide the buses access to that, eliminating their longer loop that they would have to potentially make now. So the way that we wanted to do this was to look at minimal infrastructure changes that would have to happen to the site. This way, we're looking at those vegetated buffers. We would have to cut through those and allow for the bus loop to then add new curbing and asphalt, but can easily connect to the garage area itself, which would allow them to then have that access to 3rd Street. This 3rd Street access is capable of being used by the users, so anyone that's needing to use the garage itself, but also the future, the bus connection as well. We are maintaining the other access points at Veterans Way, as well as the entry and exit at Logan. So just kind of highlighting that again, what we said, we would maintain the entry and exit point at Logan. We are allowing for the bus access road. It would have solid barriers to keep those areas separate from the rest of the vehicular operations that are happening inside, as well as have that area gated. We have a large striped area to just show that this is still able to be used for the future TOD back of house access. So they're loading and unloading of services, or maybe a dumpster pad that would have to maybe go back there. And then the site enhancements, of course, that would have to happen at 3rd Street. So allowing for new crosswalks, easier access, and signalization improvements that would need to happen. Just a scenario 1, we broke this down into a matrix. So in this option, we are looking at a total a little bit less than scenario 1 for total parking overall. We're hitting about 428, which is still in excess of what we would need for the CMAQ requirement goals. Bike parking facilities, we are looking at 80 plus that would be able to fit within this site. We have a lineal drop-off zone that's about 90 lineal feet long. And then this is very quick proximity, as it was just directly adjacent to the outbound platform station, less than or about 30-second walk. So we have that there. And then the bus layover facilities, we got 10 to 12 to 15 that would be able to have that. And then we have 3 to 4 access points for vehicles. Again, looking at the active number, the active frontage numbers. So in this one, we're hitting at 52%. The potential TOD frontage is about 330 lineal feet, with the garage being about 300. So you actually have more active frontage along West Main now instead of the garage. Total buildable area or lineal foot, we're hitting at 630 feet there. So just to kind of wrap those two up together, we've paired those matrix side by side so you can kind of see how those numbers are, where they're hitting, and seeing, again, kind of pointing down to the active frontage. That scenario 1 hitting at 19%, with scenario 2 standing out at 52%. And then next, we wanted to kind of show you as to what the potential of this is, throwing together some concept renderings of perspectives just to show general massing that we're looking at here, some notes that we wanted to take from the local architecture and how we could see that tying into the building. But again, this is just conceptual, and this will be later developed in the next phase. So vantage point A, we're looking as if you're standing at the intersection of 2nd Street and West Main, looking back, and what we'll see here is the garage will be in the distance. You'll be able to see the Borough Building Tower over top of the garage, as well as some architectural character tying the two structures together, as well as some public spaces that we're showing within this. So here you can see what we just pointed out. In the distance here, you can see that the Carnegie Borough Building Tower stands at right around 62 feet in height. The garage itself is hitting right around 55 feet in height, maxing that out to where we would see 4 stories for the garage. Ground floor of the garage does have to be higher to allow for potential bus access to go through that. So we have that at 16.5 feet with this, then the other flat decks having ceiling levels of 11 feet in height. We could potentially go up to 12 feet as well and stay within those zoning. And then the TOD space as well could be a 5-story structure, reaching at that 60-foot max per the zoning code. What we kind of see architecturally, what we're kind of emphasizing is we don't want the garage to just be a deck and nothing else. We want to bring in some interesting character from Carnegie, bringing in some of those tones of brick material and modernizing as well with some curtain walls of glass, bringing in some aspects of potentially metal that could be in these vertical and horizontal slats just to provide some additional interest. So you're not only looking at the facade of a garage and just wanting to really pay attention to make something that's a bit more complementary to the neighborhood. And then looking at a TOD building that could potentially be there one day as well, just seeing how those two can relate to one another and bring in pieces of Carnegie's architecture to this site as well. And then we also went into some design with the public spaces and how those can be enhanced by having the access of the rail trail in front, so a nice wide public path area that would be along West Main Street here, adding some new lighting along this and some street trees to add some vegetative interest, creating public spaces with wayfinding for the Port Authority Station at Carnegie, and incorporating some dining areas or some just nice plaza spaces for people that are using the potential retail or office that are included within those future buildings. An additional view that we want to take is from the rear of the site. So looking back at Logan Street, so we can kind of see what that operations looks like on the bus turnaround loop and the rear side of the parking structure. So we have condensed the width of the overall bus turnaround loop. So all the buses are parking parallel. That way it allows for that condense and narrowing out and elongating that loop so that it allows for potential TOD to be included in front of that. We have everything contained for the drivers themselves, for their comfort facilities, as well as charging stations, all included with that internal island. Some new vegetative areas along Logan Street here with some nice sidewalk improvements of new lighting and the additional vegetation, and then looking at how some of those characters of the architecture from the parking garage can tie into the backside of that as well. With that, we conclude our information part of the presentation, and we'd like to open it up for questions, and I'll allow Maura to kind of explain again how that works for everyone.
Great, thanks, James. So we already have some great questions in the chat that we'll definitely address, but I just also wanted to make sure that people who would like to speak or ask a question over Zoom, over the video or audio, that you use the raise your hand function, which is, here's a little outline of how to do that on each of the different kind of platforms. So I guess we'll start with the first question we got, which was about Bell Station. So Robert, do you want to ask that question or do you want me to read it aloud? Either way.
Sure, I'd be happy to read it if you can hear me.
Yep.
Bell Station is obviously the other West Busway station that serves Carnegie, sort of at the northeast end of the strip. And pedestrian access to that station from Carnegie seems to suffer from many of the same issues with like crosswalks at Chestnut and Mansfield. Were adjacent stations like Bell also considered in this, or are they sort of down the line?
So my understanding is that we only received funding to do planning for this station, for Carnegie Station in the Park and Ride area. So we certainly are looking at, connections to other nearby stations, but it's not necessarily part of the design of this. But I think you bring up a lot of really good points. I don't know if anybody from the team wants to add to that, but I think, we're certainly considering what's nearby as we do this project. So yeah, but usually we do one station at a time. So, but those are good kind of considerations for our future planning. Okay, so Allison, would you like to ask your question, or I can read it for you as well? Okay, so Allison asks, is Carnegie looking to amend their zoning code to take full advantage of TOD? This garage could be built with the ability to add floors of housing at a later date, but the zoning makes that harder to even start discussing. So I know that the Port Authority worked with the Borough of Carnegie and Connect on a project that that made suggestions to how they could change their zoning code to better accommodate these kinds of developments. Breen, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that process and kind of what came out of that.
Well, I will say it was just a few years ago that Carnegie revised its zoning code, and the project that we are presenting here obviously fits within that. I know there are lots of different, I think, feelings about going higher than what's on the site now with the borough building and the max height that the code allows. The kinds of recommendations that came out of the zoning project that we did, which was a multi-municipal effort through Connect, had to do with little tweaks. And so Carnegie has received a custom sort of set of recommendations for how they could update their code. I don't have those in front of me at the moment, so I can't recite them all to you. But in most cases, they had to do with things like ensuring that business districts didn't have setback requirements that were large when all of the historic buildings come right up to the sidewalk. So, or that they were required to have side yards when all of the storefronts, all the historic storefronts are right next to each other. So it's things like that help the community maintain the historic feel, even when new buildings are built. That is really a lot of what we talked about. Density and height bonuses are certainly something that municipalities can undertake as part of TOD. That's a sort of a best practice, but of course it's up to each community to figure out sort of what is best for them and what works within their individual context. So if the borough, if the staff and elected leadership of the borough are interested in thinking about how to encourage more, I see that Mayor Riley has noted our work with Connect there that I'm talking about now. But if the leadership is interested in thinking about how to better incentivize TOD through policies like height bonuses and density bonuses, we're certainly willing to help them work through how to craft that kind of policy. So we're here to support enabling the community to do what it wants, that also, since we all have a shared goal of TOD.
Yeah, I'd also like to give anybody from the borough an opportunity to comment on that as well. Mayor Riley, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that, or any of the kind of council members or planning commission members. If not, that's okay. We can.
I mean, the only thing I would want to add is it was a great collaboration between Connect and the Port Authority. We went through many workshops to look at the development of this, and it was a great partnership. So, you know, we were given our toolkit, as I would say, that I mentioned in the chat. And I think that sharing that with members of council and now with the community can help us move this development forward. So it's exciting.
Great, thank you.
It's Keith Conover. I'm with the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that as we went through that multi-jurisdiction zoning review and updated things, one of the things that we've talked about, which relates to this, is not only setting aside the setbacks to maintain the features of this small urban community, but also to, we even considered what's called a forms-based code, because one of the things we didn't want to have is, I'm sure people have been places in downtown where you're walking along a sidewalk and there's no setback and there's no windows and there's no doors and it's just a blank wall. It's really creepy. And so one of the things we decided to do was to use the Planning Commission to try and make sure we looked at everything we developed and make sure that it's a friendly place for pedestrians as far as the way the actual buildings are designed.
Great, thank you. And then I'll go to Richard DeLoss, who I know is a council member.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the last time we did a major zoning rewrite, we did consider TOD, and the area behind the Hannes Wagner Apartments, which is currently a lumber yard, and adjacent to that, a large school bus parking lot. We rezoned all of that area to make it available for housing development and mixed use development so that developers would have that space if they wanted to build residential townhomes or some similar structures with people would have access to the busway.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go back to some of our chat questions. So Chris Sandvig asks, in scenario 1, what regional carriers are using this location to begin with? And why would Port Authority's riders have to be in the elements while the much smaller regional ridership gets to be under the roof? James, could you go to one of the scenario 1 images? So as far as the different carriers, I know that, I'm going to forget this. It's either that some of them are interested in using it and they're not currently, and we wanted to kind of plan for that future collaboration, or they are using it currently. But I think some of the ones that might potentially be using it are Beaver, Washington County. I think I'm forgetting a few of them.
Yeah, I can jump in. Right now, this layer facility and station area are used only by the Port Authority. But there is the possibility of adding flexibility so that buses from Beaver County or Washington County or from either ACTA or Access, there's the possibility that they could make some transfers here. Because the West Busway service that Port Authority provides is very fast, very efficient. It's a very good quality of service. It comes frequently. It hits all the marks that riders want to see out of their bus service. And so it could save some time for those riders, but it could also make it easier for Beaver County or Washington County or for other Port Authority routes to transfer their passengers onto the mainline West Busway service if only we added those facilities. I think that the station area itself is not necessarily going to change for Carnegie Station. There is the possibility that regional buses could have facilities underneath the structure for passengers to get off or to wait for their bus, and then they would walk over to Port Authority's Carnegie Station, or there's the possibility that Port Authority's Carnegie Station is where they would make that exchange. I think there's not necessarily a preference either way. That would all be kind of worked out through design. But right now there are no plans for regional buses to use this area.
Thanks, Elijah. So yeah, we're just, future planning. In terms of being out in the elements, I think they are not underneath the cover here, or the Port Authority riders also have a covered outbound and inbound platform that they would be waiting at in this scenario as well. So
it is a covered platform on the inbound side. I'm not actually sure about the outbound side because it doesn't go anywhere. You wouldn't wait for a bus there. But on the inbound side, there is a shelter, there are benches, there are trash cans, there are maps, there's lighting. There's probably a safety call box, and I think that there are wind breaks as well. So panels that come out to provide a little bit of a wind break.
Thanks. Okay, let's see. So the next question in the chat is, charging for electric buses was mentioned. Is an option for electric vehicle charging for the general public included in any of the garage options? That's a really good question. I'm not sure. I think it's something we sort of vaguely talked about, but it seems like something we could keep in mind for future designs. I think that's a really good idea. I think there was talk of an area in scenario 2, if I'm not mistaken, like kind of in the first phase, having kind of a set aside for special kind of uses like that. So it's definitely something we can consider going forward. And I think that's a great question and a great suggestion. Let's see. So how do we persuade PennDOT to narrow a road? That's a very good question. It's tough. Breen, I can defer to you to that kind of process and how we have those conversations.
Sure. So one of the key things is us all being on the same page. So if the community, supports that and the borough is willing to be an active partner with us in having those discussions with PennDOT, that's a really good first step. They still don't have to listen to us, and that's the reality of the world we work in, and believe me, I feel it almost every day. But Connect does, PennDOT does have a program called PennDOT Connects, which is different than the organization Connect. And we, as Port Authority, keep a really close eye on that program. We now even have a staff person who's on this call with us, Craig from Port Authority's planning department, who helps us keep an eye on that program and work with PennDOT to make changes, usually small changes, and if they're big changes, then we've got to find money to do it, but work with them to make changes to the design of their projects at an early stage. So if they're going to do work, then we can come to the conversation and say, well, we have a plan that says, and having a plan is really, really good leverage in those conversations. So it's somewhat useful for Carnegie Borough or Port Authority to go to those conversations with PennDOT and say, we've been talking about this, or we know from practice that this would be really useful for us. It's even more helpful to have a plan that has received community support, that has elected official support, that we can show to PennDOT and say, look, we talked about this, we designed this, we know it works, everybody wants it, please work with us to make it happen. And we're starting to see that program has been around about 2 years, and we're starting to see some incremental improvements. So, change like, turning the direction of an organization the size of PennDOT, it takes a while. But if we all, again, are sort of working in the same direction, pushing in the same direction on them, especially when they have a program like PennDOT Connects that says that they're supposed to have these conversations and take this input and consider how to upgrade projects, then we're on the right track. I think we can we can make eventually see some positive outcomes, including the safety of this particular road and this particular intersection, which have been problematic a long time, because we know that the 2010 study that was done here called for these same improvements, right? So it's 10 years later, nothing has happened. So we're going to produce another study that says it's still a good idea. And we're going to look for opportunities to have that conversation with PennDOT. So hopefully the borough is willing to work with us on that. And I think that also the ongoing trail discussion that's happening can't really be had, if we're going to talk about eventually building that trail, we can't have that conversation without also talking about West Main and the intersection there with Mansfield and Jefferson. So that is another reason for that to continue to be front of mind for all of us.
And just following up on what Breen has mentioned, Todd and I have actually had success with this process. We did a study for a university within the city of Pittsburgh, and this too was pretty much 10 years ago. And we proposed a road diet of a 4-lane PennDOT road through a urban network right in the middle of this college campus. And it took a pretty comprehensive traffic analysis and a report that we had to get approved through the city of Pittsburgh. And we were able to, once we had their backing and that of the community, we were able to go to PennDOT and propose this road diet. And we reduced it to 2 lanes, just a single lane each direction with bi-directional bike lanes. And I'm not sure if it would have happened without the PennDOT Connects program. They were coming through with a project to just simply do a mill and fill and paint everything back just the way it was. And through our early coordination and our gentle nudging every so often, it did become a real project, and they updated all the traffic signals, all the ADA curb ramps and crossings along the corridor as well, and it turned out to be a great project. So it as Breen had mentioned, it doesn't typically happen very quickly, but we have had some success.
Thanks. So the next question is from Kay Kobistik. Do you foresee any issues with obtaining matching funds for the CMAQ grant? I'm assuming you mean on the Port Authority's side of that. So do we foresee any issues getting our own funding? Am I understanding that question correctly? Just want to make sure.
No, it would be the other side.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, I think it's kind of unpredictable right now what funding we're going to get for which projects. I know that I know I had an answer for this, but yeah, I know that we are anticipating, that there's definitely additional funding that would need to be awarded depending on like the scope of the project after this first initial 10% design phase is finished. And so I think that we just don't really know what the time frame for that is. Unfortunately, it's just very unpredictable to be able to predict that. So I don't have a specific answer for you, unfortunately. But we'll kind of see how things continue to evolve, at the federal level.
Can I jump in and just add to that? I just want to make sure folks have the context for why it's unpredictable. It seems like we say that a lot, I'm sure, because I'm sure some of you remember me coming to a council meeting maybe 2 years ago and saying we weren't sure when we were going to start this project. Right now, obviously, our budget is challenged by, as I'm sure those of you in local government are familiar with, challenged by the economic fallout of the pandemic. But then we've also got a funding cliff approaching at the state level, right? So at this point, we can't be sure whether we'll have resolved one issue before the next issue really sets in. And we're working very hard to prioritize safety sensitive types of capital projects first. The good news is, that the federal funding for this project is, will be available to us this coming year. And so as soon as we can get our part of the money to complete the engineering phase and then move into construction, you know, there are significant funds available to help us through this project. But in the meantime, you know, our uncertainty really has to do with circumstances beyond our control. And we're really excited that we were able to do this phase of the project, and we'll, you know, continue to steward it through those other phases as soon as we can. And we'll keep in touch with you about that, whether or not it's moving ahead. You know, we talk to Steve on a pretty regular basis so that he knows where these things are. And so we will keep you posted.
Great. So next question, what considerations have been taken to account for rider and pedestrian safety at night? The first option encloses the entire site, which blocks visual connection to the street or even police station next door. The second option remains much more open around the future development site. Honestly, I'm not sure that we have talked through that as much, but I think that's really good feedback to have about the comparison between the two. I don't know if Elijah or James, if you wanted to comment on that further, but I think that's a great observation that I certainly hadn't been thinking of before.
Sure, yeah. Anytime that we do design, we always think of SEPTED, which is basically designing around safety of pedestrians practices. So in scenario 2, we're thinking about how do we keep that completely open and well lit at night. So in some of the renderings that we kind of showcased, we were showing that we're looking at wide open pedestrian spaces that has adequate lighting and clear vegetation that allows for good see-through for anyone that's driving through. So it is a very well secured design, allowing so that, you know, you don't feel like you're in any uncomfortable or dark areas, essentially. So we always take those considerations whenever we're doing general conceptual design and then moving forward. So here we're kind of conceptualizing where lighting might go, but in the next phase of the design, we'll move that into a reality considering the actual lighting. So we'll look at candle light wattages and whatnot. So that's hitting the ground. So we're making sure that those kinds of elements are adequately hit whenever we're going into the next stage of design.
Great, thank you. Next question, will the parking lot remain free or will there be a charge to park here? Carnegie's businesses often note lack of parking as an issue locally, and can visitors park in this garage if they are not going to ride the bus? Well, I think, you know, we don't really know, basically, is the answer to that. We haven't, you know, charged for parking in the past, and it's, you know, not something we have like concrete plans to do, but, you know, that could change someday. But as you know, as of right now, we're not, you know, planning to charge for this parking lot. You know, I don't think we've really, you know, talked through about, you know, if we could make this a shared parking situation. I think definitely most of the spaces will be, you know, dedicated to the park and ride use. And so you will have to be a user of transit to park there. But I know we've had discussions about, you know, if there is TOD here, is there a way for us to accommodate the parking requirements of that development within the parking garage? So those are definitely questions that we're thinking through. We just don't, you know, have that level of detail yet. But it's something that we continue to think through as we're, you know, evaluating the scenarios. Okay. Keith, I'm going to call on you since you've had your hand raised for a while. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mara.
Mm-hmm.
So my question, it was also a little bit on the chat, but the question of both scenario number 1 and phase 2 of scenario number 2 are dependent on getting across the railroad tracks there. And on the order of 10 or 15 years ago, a large group of us from the Planning Commission actually went out and scouted on the ground the route from Walker's Mill, where the Panhandle Trail currently ends, down to the Borough Building, and realized that there's a choke point there. You can't do it parallel to the tracks, and that the only way to do it would be able to get the railroad to give up their right of way. And it turns out they had absolutely no interest in that, and we just gave up on it. So both of these are dependent on that. Has anyone approached the railroad? Is there any interest on their part in giving up something that they have absolutely no requirement to give up? Because they didn't even want to talk to us.
Yeah, well, I know that the Port Authority supported an Active Allegheny grant that Carnegie applied for to kind of do that very thing, to talk with the railroad about this trail and to try to get somewhere with them on that. I know, we were very supportive of that project. I'm not really sure where it stands right now in terms of the grant and how far along the project is. Or those discussions, but I don't know if Steve, if you wanted to jump in and talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So just like you had said with the start of COVID, things kind of fell off with the momentum on moving forward with it, but we did receive the funding through Allegheny County, and we did have the opportunity around last Thanksgiving to take a walk down towards Collier and basically just continue our process with our research. And that's kind of where it ended at that point. But in working with the staff from Active Allegheny and Allegheny County, we've been doing our best just to make contact with the Port Authority, or pardon me, with the railroad, so we can bring up these items that we're looking to research. So as of right now, we're looking to get started with that process, but we are still moving forward. So that's the update that I would give.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. Have you reviewed the hydraulic model for the Campbell's Run watershed and how it impacts the West Busway? Curious, since that was a concern in the past. James or Elijah, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we did, and we do have an extended version of our analysis. We did show an abbreviated version of it, but we did review some of the floodplain analysis that we had from Chartiers Creek, and kind of just seeing the floodplain issues that could be in some sort of a potential challenge. And in our analysis, what we had using FEMA mapping and whatnot, we found that is not an issue at this point in time for potential development in here. It all sits. AS is in the flat area, but it was, and sorry, I don't remember the exact zoning that it was in off the top of my head, but we did determine that it wasn't of any issue at this point in time, or according to the FEMA mapping for that.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so another question, let's see. These are more comments, kind of about, Allison says she likes the flexibility in the first scenario and how there are multiple uses in the same building. So riders and drivers are both activating the same space, versus the segregation in large open paved area in the second scenario. Appears to be more forward thinking with regard to future development, which may or may not ever happen. That's helpful. I'm gonna go to, so Jock says that the scale of the building in the first option seems massive and not really on a pedestrian scale, but that the second option's future development space can be an open space that might be used for community safety days, 5K, farmers market, and other Carnegie events while it is waiting to be developed. That's definitely a good comment to keep in mind. She also says that many people walk their dogs and jog and bike in the lot in the evening. The second option seems to be able to preserve that activity. Okay, that's good to know. Robert agrees with Jock about the scale of the first building, not really feeling suitable for pedestrian. On the other hand, it might serve as a route to enhance some of the station operations. However, I do like option 2's frontage along Main Street to face the community. Can Logan Street handle this kind of traffic? It is an unlined road right now, definitely a side street. You know, I don't know, have we, Rich or Todd, kind of looked at that, the levels of traffic on Logan and kind of what it's able to accommodate?
Well, currently today, the main entry is, of course, along Veterans Way, and existing conditions do show ingress and egress along Logan Street. There's 2 connections. Obviously, there would be a greater demand with additional parking spaces. However, we would expect most of that to be autos. as Logan Street is posted no trucks. So we would be looking at additional auto trips throughout the day. I don't have an actual level of service to report. And looking at the previous studies at the area, Todd and I have reviewed, seems that many folks tend to arrive at once in the AM rush hour, and then it kind of spreads out throughout the rest of the day from there. But it would just be auto traffic. But if we were to compare level of service wise, we would have to collect some data and run the analyses. The problem with that is right now with everybody working from home, you can't really go out and count. You really wouldn't get any valid data to use in the analysis. So at this point, it would just be some assumptions that we could run with. But it's something to take note of that we could certainly look into.
Great, thank you. So we have about 8 minutes left. Does anybody who hasn't had the chance to speak or ask a question have anything to say or anything to ask? Okay, well, we do have one more question in the chat. Are any solar arrays possible on this site or other environmental improvements? I would say theoretically, yes. You know, that's always a possibility in theory. It's not something that we've, you know, solar arrays, we haven't like put that into the plan per se, but I think it's definitely something that's very possible in the future, depending on, you know, what type of TOD might go here. But yeah, I don't know. There aren't really any specific plans for that yet.
Maura, this is Owen. May I make a comment, please?
Sure.
Somebody asked about the garage having flat floors, and I don't know that anyone commented on that. So I think that may deserve some attention. I think it was in the second or third comment.
Sorry, I may have missed that.
It's part of Allison's comment. It says a garage could be built with the ability to add floors. I mean, it was a suggestion as well as an observation. So I thought perhaps someone on the team might want to comment on that.
Yeah, well, we did have kind of,
okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we did have a discussion about zoning and how, you know, the current zoning code does or doesn't allow for additional floors. But we had a discussion about, you know, how the zoning could be changed and the process that we went through with Connect and the borough on kind of looking at changing their zoning or making suggestions on how that might be possible. So, you know, I thought it was a good discussion, and there, you know, I think we talked about that, right? Am I missing something?
Yeah. Well, I think in addition to what you just highlighted, I think what Owen was getting at is that what we sort of skipped over in addressing the zoning comment was the opportunity that we are building into the garage by having flat floor plates and assuring that we have a minimum height that takes this into consideration. We can design a garage that could be converted to uses that are occupied by people in the future. So the additional density, there is an opportunity to add density to the site, to add transit-oriented development, not through height, but through converting parking to other uses in the future, if that is something that the community and the market would support.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I skipped over that part.
I
I'm
also
gonna jump real quick. Sorry. Considering there was like, you know, a dozen or two.
We can't hear you, Craig. Your audio is quiet. You can type it. into the chat box.
Try to resolve that. I did also want to make another comment about the solar and wind turbine questions that we got. Port Authority has thus far done pretty limited experimentation with renewable energy. In general, we are working toward an organizational sustainability plan, and again, it's not the same sort of funding uncertainty as this project, but it's on the operating side. But we are hoping to add a director of sustainability position that would allow us to think more comprehensively about how we approach sustainability. But that will be, sort of that's on hold until we know that we have the funding in place to support that position so that position is sustainable financially. And so at that point, I think that would open the doors for us in terms of being able to incorporate those kinds of systems and technologies into our property across the county. I agree with you that it would be great to have those things on this site, but we need to know that we've thought through how that happens, both on a sort of a tactical, like local implementation level, but then also like how do our systems account for those kinds of technologies being incorporated into all of our various ongoing systems, including maintenance and other things. So it's definitely on the radar, but it may not be something that happens on the same time frame as this project.
Yeah, great. So I think we are wrapping up here, but we have a couple more questions and comments. So Allison, another comment here. It would be helpful if Port Authority could show what the future development spaces of both scenarios could be used for in the meantime, whether they'll be green space or what it could be used for events like farmers markets may make a big difference to many people. That's a really good comment, actually. Since we are, showing two different phases, I think it would be, that's a good thought. And I think we can try to work on that for sure. Let's see. How many spaces is the parking garage from Craig? Do you mean which one?
So I think he's just he's looking to make a point about the impact on traffic. If there's more than one entrance, it would be distributed to some degree. So we're really concerned about the phase one issue in terms of Logan Street.
Okay.
Because we may not be, the 3rd Street entrance and that being a possible additional entrance is contingent on a lot of external factors.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So we have time for one last question here. So can we display any plans or coming soon renderings to get excitement or buy-in from the community? I think maybe. I mean, we're gonna basically the next steps here. That's a good segue to kind of what the next steps are. The next steps are for us to kind of narrow this down to one of these two scenarios, and then to take that scenario to what's called 10% conceptual design. So to really, add a little bit more detail to the design and to kind of give you a better idea of what it would look like from the neighborhood, from downtown Carnegie. And so at that point, that's kind of probably the design that you'd want to display to the community, I would think. So, I'm not sure if we've done that in the past on previous Port Authority projects, if we've posted plans on our stations anywhere to kind of get people's input and feedback that way. But it's a good idea for sure to get to generate buy-in for sure. It's a good consideration. Okay, so we're right here at 7:30. As I mentioned before, if I didn't make it clear, sorry, this was recorded, and this will be available for people to watch on our website. And for anybody who wasn't able to attend or has questions, this will be available online. We also have our website, which will be there will be a comment function on there to provide feedback for the next several weeks and months. We're really excited to hear from the community, and I can make sure that you have I'm putting my email address in the chat right now, so please feel free to also reach out to me directly with any questions that you might have. And if there's nothing else, and the slides, of course, will be available on the website. We'll put those up shortly, probably tomorrow, just so everybody can view those. And yeah, if there's nobody, does anybody else have any other questions or comments that they'd like to add? Okay. Well, with that, I guess we're going to end just about right on time. We've got some really great feedback here. Thank you so much for everybody who participated and took the time to, be on this virtual meeting. And we look forward to speaking with you soon about the next step in the process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maura.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.